Once again, my name is Fred Nauer. I'm the Chief Flight Instructor for Thunderbird Aviation, and today we'll be talking about with a little bit of an introduction to ForeFlight, how to, what are some of the systems that are available on the ForeFlight itself, and all the various buttons and things and what they do, and then we'll end the process by going through and looking at how to plan a VFR and or an IFR flight plan, and then how to file that flight plan using ForeFlight. So the first thing I want to do is get some basic information out. This piece here is off of the ForeFlight.com website. It's the pricing of the systems of the various levels that ForeFlight has on it. The reason I do this at the beginning of it is not that I'm trying to sell or anything, or that I'm getting anything back from ForeFlight for this, but I just want to let you know that many of you are in the basic plus level of ForeFlight, and some of you may be even grandfathered in from the old professional side that was only $144. They'll let you maintain that level as long as you want, but if you want to upgrade or do anything different, then you're going to have to join one of these three levels that are on the screen right now. Excuse me. So the 99 level does all sorts of wonderful things, flight planning and graphical briefing and weather, and the big thing is the IFR charts. We'll look at that. You can do weight and balance with the thing. Use the ForeFlight as your logbook, put a checklist on there, all sorts of neat stuff that we'll take a look at today. If you go to the $200 version, then everything that we just talked about, plus georeferences, approach, and charts. What that means is the airplane appears on the approach chart or the taxi diagram as you're taxiing around. You can get the approach plates or the taxi plates put on the map on the sectional chart itself so that you can see where you're going, and in addition to be able to watch the maps at the same time. Synthetic vision, which is kind of a poor man's G1000 kind of way, PFD kind of thing. And then finally, then some other stuff. Then the $300 version, this is the one I'm at, so that you may see some of the stuff that I'm doing. The other reason I bring this up is you may see some of the stuff that I'm doing on my screen that you may not be able to do on yours, depending on what level you're at. But I think the only reason I bought the $300 version was because of the information that you can get for icing levels at various altitudes. The $300 version is basically set up for like charter operations or something where there's a whole bunch of people all using the same system, the same level, the same subscription to ForeFlight, and it does you can put in many different airplanes and all that kind of stuff too. So the other thing I wanted to show you while we're in the ForeFlight.com area here is that this is the most recent change to ForeFlight. If you already have a Garmin system in your airplane, then the ForeFlight now has a way of connecting the Garmin system in your airplane to ForeFlight, and it'll talk back and forth to each other. You can plan the flight on ForeFlight, transfer it to the Garmin system using either the Stream 110, 210, or 510. I'm sorry, I'm not a Garmin person, so I'm not exactly sure what all that stuff means. But in reading the stuff, when it talks about here, it'll go from ForeFlight to the Garmin, and if you change something on Garmin, it will change on the ForeFlight if they're connected to each other inside the airplane. So that's the nice thing about that one. Plus all the other Garmin things, including the Garmin VO transponder with ADS-B out, the Garmin receivers, and for both GPS and ADS-B also now connect to ForeFlight. So if you have Garmin systems in your airplane and you're using ForeFlight, they can connect and talk to each other. Just go to ForeFlight.com/connect/Garmin to get this information up and be able to figure out how to connect your ForeFlight system to the Garmin in your airplane. I usually go through updates that have happened in the recent months since the last time we talked about this. But all the new updates for Garmin are for the ForeFlight system, excuse me, are all either subscription things that you have to spend more money on, or in the professional, the Performance Plus area, which so since most people don't go up that high, I decided to just skip talking about those updates today. So let's do this. So stand by for just a second. Let me get you hooked up to my ForeFlight on my iPad right here sitting next to me on the desk, which is why you're seeing me look sideways right now. So here's the basic ForeFlight screen, and the first thing I want to talk about here is down here in the bottom, about 4 steps in, is the document section. Close that out. In the document section down under drives, there's the ForeFlight, the FAA file, which has all the FAA publications listed in there, including all the handbooks, the ones that are already color coded in here, the ones that I've already downloaded. So if you don't mind reading things off your screen, you can get all the FAA handbooks attached to your to ForeFlight. You can get chart supplements and all the regulations just downloaded for free. The other thing I bring up here is the under drives is the ForeFlight section. And I always suggest that at least at a minimum you download the pilot's guide to ForeFlight Mobile, because if you're having trouble trying to figure out something, or because even in a 2-hour block, there are going to be some of these things where I'm going to go through this stuff fairly quickly. So if you download the pilot guide to ForeFlight Mobile, it does an excellent job of, it has a search engine for both the contents, table of contents, and just by typing in words to be able to search through the thing to be able to find it. And if you download this into ForeFlight, every time ForeFlight is updated, the book is updated at the same time. So you'll always have the most current information in the pilot's guide to ForeFlight Mobile. The other one I've downloaded is the weight and balance section in there, because if you have the higher, the weight and balance is something that you can use in the basic plus area, but the higher levels you go, the more help you get from the downloading systems in ForeFlight as far as being able to put airplanes in there in the first place. We'll talk about weight and balance here in a second. So back to map. So down there on the bottom, I just tap the map thing again, because most of the stuff that we need to look at will be here in the map section. So the first thing I want to talk about before it disappears, because it's only there for in my case 4 hours, because I chose that section, is this green line here. The green line is under settings, which is the little gear at the very top of the ForeFlight there. You go to settings and move on down. For map overlays, one of the choices is breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs is exactly that. As you start to fly, once you get to be start moving about 30 knots, this green line appears on your scope, on your iPad. So you know exactly where you've been, just like breadcrumbs in like Hansel and Gretel were trying to do when they were walking into the woods. So then you can see where you flew, and this is the latest flight I did this morning with one of my CFI candidates. He's getting ready for his CFI check ride on CFI check ride on next Wednesday. So we went out and did some of the maneuvers and everything to see how well things were going. The nice thing about this is if you're connected to the Wi-Fi, just tap the first thing on the top section of the ForeFlight there, which gives you choices for all the things that can be displayed on the map itself. If you click Aerial Map, it gives you the a space view of the Earth, sort of like Google Maps. And then you can zoom out, and this part right here, where the that's right in the middle of the screen right now, that was his ASON pylons. And so we talked about how you would try to aim for the middle between the two, so that the two loops end up being more closer to the right shape. And this one down here, right south of that, was where he turns around a point. So that's the trick with trying to do it in your CFI candidate stuff. You're trying to talk about it while you're doing it, and sometimes things don't turn out to be a nice perfect circle. But the nice thing about this is if you're an instructor or you're out there practicing these maneuvers on your own, you can go to this aerial map section and be able to see exactly where you were in the world and how well you stayed in the areas that you were trying to do. So let's get rid of that map and go back to the aeronautical map, which is a recreation by ForeFlight of all the information that you'll get off a sectional and the en route charts all in one spot. But the nice thing about this one is the reason they did this is because if you're heading south, all the words shift around so that you can read all the stuff on the chart. If you're using a sectional or an en route chart that we're going to look at here in just a little bit, if you're heading south, all the words are upside down. So this is what ForeFlight tried to do, so they make it easier to be able to read stuff as you're flying around. So it has, you can, over on the left side there, there's all those blue squares that are all filled in, or those are all the choices that you can do for the stuff that appears on the aeronautical map. Let me zoom out just a little bit farther here and turn everything off and just start at the top and show you what each one of these things does. So the first thing is airspace. And I'm sorry, the first thing is airports. So now ForeFlight doesn't try to, as you zoom out, because you can get the whole Earth on ForeFlight. So as you zoom out, it shows you less and less detail. As you zoom back in, then more detail shows up and more of the airports show up. And it's the same color coding as on the sectional chart. So if it's a blue airport in the picture here, it's a Class D airport, controlled airport. If it's magenta colored, because we don't like to say pink in the pilot world, if it's a magenta color, then it's a uncontrolled airport. Then the next step down, the next square down, is all the airspace. It gives you, in this case, the Minneapolis Class B airspace with the various altitudes of all the sectors and everything. And the purple line, the magenta line for the 30 nautical mile mode C veil around the whole thing. Now, some of the time to get the finest detail, you got to zoom in, get all the altitudes and everything that you're looking for as far as the airspace is concerned. But it has all the airspace, including Class C airspace, like over in Green Bay, and all the controlled air, all the special use airspace. Here's the restricted area out there that's in Wisconsin, and the restricted areas are in orange. The stuff in magenta is the MOA that's around that section up there. We move up here near St. Cloud, that orange area up there, that's the restricted area. That's Camp Ripley. So all that's in the airspace section. The next one down, the next square down is all the Victor Airways. So they use this aeronautical map is basically set for low altitude operations, just the Victor Airways itself. The next one down, then we have to kind of move out here to see this, is the information about the air route traffic control centers across the United States. So the first thing you're going to see is the sectors in the airspace and the frequencies that you could use to be able to contact Minneapolis Center in the Alexandria sector. We move all the way out to the very edge, then we can see this dashed line going all the way around through North and South Dakota, around Minnesota, into Wisconsin, and down into Iowa. That's the whole Minneapolis Center sector. The people down in Farmington, Minnesota, sit at radar scopes and control this whole area in radar coverage. We move out a little bit more and then hit the next square down. We get land stuff, all the lakes and mountains and stuff like that. And finally, we have to move back in to see it a little bit closer, but finally, it's all the roads, or all the major roads anyway. It doesn't go down to street view. It doesn't. Oh yes, it does. Look at that. May not tell you what the name of the street is, but at least it'll tell you some of the major roads of the areas that you're flying around in. The nice thing about the aeronautical map is that if you don't want to spend the money to get in the $200 or $300 level, and you want to use your map to figure out where you are at the airport, you go to the aeronautical map and zoom in real close, and all the taxiways and all the runways are depicted right on the aeronautical map. So the airplane, where you are in the world, will always appear on the charts, this chart here in ForeFlight, so you can use this to help you figure out where you are on the airport. So that's the aeronautical map. There is a street map. Has exactly that. Now this one has the names of the roads and everything on it. Again, to get the street map, you're going to have to be hooked up to the Wi-Fi. This is not something you're not going to be able to see while you're flying. The only time I've used this is when somebody said, hey, I want a scenic flight. I want to fly around the Twin Cities and look at the Christmas lights. So I went to the Star Tribune newspaper, and it had this section in there about the best light displays in the Twin Cities. And I just looked up their addresses and found the streets and tapped the locations here, and then flew around the Class B airspace looking for these places. And I thought it was a good idea at the time, but not really. Unless the whole block got together to put their Christmas lights up, it's not really something you can see from the altitudes we normally fly. But there is this street map option, the aerial map we've already looked at. So then the next one down, for the basic price of $999.99 a year, you can get all the sectional charts in the United States, and Alaska, and Hawaii, and Guam, and Puerto Rico. So for that right there, that's worth the price of admission right there. So then they've done it, so they've set it up so that all the sectionals are fairly seamless, moving from one to the other, so that you can't even tell the boundary between the Minneapolis, or the Twin Cities, and the Green Bay sectional is out here between Minnesota and Wisconsin someplace. You can't even tell that there's where the boundary is between the two charts. They did a very good job of sewing all this stuff together. Get rid of this breadcrumb thing so we can see things just a little bit better. So you can have all the sectional charts in the country for the $99 level. You can also have all the IFR low charts. If you're an instrument person and you're going to be flying in the IFR low area, the Victor Airways down below 18,000 feet, then all the Victor Airways low altitude en route charts for the entire United States, and Alaska, and Hawaii, and Guam, and not Puerto Rico for some reason, but all the low en route charts. And So get rid of that one, go down to the next one. If you have an airplane that can go up above 18,000 feet, you also, for the same $99.99 price, get all of the high-end route charts already set up for you. So get rid of that previous one. And for those airspaces that are really, really busy, the Class B airspaces that happen to have VFR flyways through them, you can also get all the VFR flyway charts for all the airports that have those around them. It's usually around Class B airports. But as you can see, Minneapolis is not one of those, so we really don't have to worry about that. But a flyway is basically an area that is set aside for VFR flying so that you can fly near Class B airports and not have to worry about getting clearance to enter the airspace. If you're in the flyway itself, you don't have to talk to anybody. Probably a good idea, but it's not required. So that's all the chart size. So let me bring the sectional back up just so we have a reference. What I'm going to do right now is tap the little circle in the upper right-hand corner of the ForeFlight thing, and that takes you right to your location. This dot is right where my house is. This blue dot right there in the middle. I'm just north of the big airport. Anyway, so on the other side of the drop-down box that you pull in that first section here is all sorts of other extra information. Most of it has to do with weather. The first button is radar composite. I have to zoom out a little ways here. The composite radar is the radar precipitation at all altitudes. So let's zoom in on this big one around Chicago. This thunderstorm right here near Chicago. So the composite, this is the way that precipitation looks at all altitudes. And if you take that radar and move it to the lowest tilt version, then it's the lowest level where precipitation is. So down where we fly, this is most likely what the weather is going to look like. When you're flying, if you have ADS-B in your airplane, either through your Garmin system or from a Stratus or one of the other systems that you can get from, we have Stratus transponders with ADS-B out and in our airplane, so we can get all this information from the as we're flying too, including all the traffic stuff, which we'll see here in a second. But when you're in the air, all you're going to get is the composite radar. They don't have the capability of doing the lowest tilt while you're flying around in the air. After radar, the next thing is enhanced satellite, which is basically just where are the clouds. You can sort of see the stuff around Chicago and stuff up here on the in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Some of this stuff is just nice to see, but it's really. Next one is the color infrared satellite looking at the clouds. Icing level in the United States. So the color coding system on the bottom, how old the information is, and over here on the right side, there's the square that if you touch that and move it, you can go up to the various altitudes. And since it's been so hot here all summer long, not many icing levels here in the United States right at this point. So turbulence in the United States. Come on. Ever since COVID, sometimes if I just did the disinfectant, sometimes my iPad doesn't recognize my fingers. But anyway, turbulence levels based on the varying colors and stuff. And again, moving up and down. with the square on the side for what altitudes you're going to be flying at, where the turbulence is and how strong it is. Cloud depictions. Surface analysis chart, lows and highs and all the fronts and things, and areas of and the isobars on the chart. So this is the most current chart here. So for surface analysis, winds and temperatures aloft. Again, based on whatever altitude you want. Oh, look now, it's even, so because I have the Performance Plus, they even animate the winds for me. So I can see exactly which way the winds are blowing and where the highs and lows are and that type of thing. So how does that tell me what the wind speed is? I don't know. The hazard advisor only works, as you can see here in the corner, if you're going 30 knots. So it'll tell you if you're depending on what altitude you're flying at, whether you're going to run into anybody or not anybody, but anything on the ground. So the thing you're most likely going to use most often is the traffic. If you're hooked up to Wi-Fi, the traffic will appear so that as you can see what the traffic is, where you're coming from and where you're going to. Let me go back to the sectional chart so it's a little easier to see. But all the little triangle pieces there, those are the airplanes that are flying around. And the system will give you their altitudes. And if they're hooked up to ADS-B in or out, or in the talking to ATC near Class B airports, you'll also be able to see the tail number. And in flight, you'll actually have a little line out the front of the airplane to show you where they're going to be in about the next minute. So the longer the line, the faster they're moving. But you can tap on the airplane in the air, and it'll actually tell you what altitude they're at, which it already says, but also give you their airspeed. So you'll be able to tell how fast they're flying. The next thing down is the CAP grid. So if you belong to the Civil Air Patrol and you're doing search and rescue operations, they've set up a system so that you can have the grids depicted on the charts for you. SIGMETs and AirMets, all color coded. And again, same thing down here. Just start one at a time. There is a little bit of icing. There's an icing SIGMET up there in the mountains. High turbulence near the thunderstorms and clouds we were looking at. Low turbulence, not so much. IFR areas up there in the Upper Peninsula and the places where the thunderstorms are around Chicago and out east. If you tap on the square, then it gives you the information about what you're looking at there. And then if you tap the little arrow on the side there, it gives you the whole write-up about what the information is about the thunderstorm or the whatever SIGMET or AirMet that you're looking at. So in this case, this is a convective SIGMET for thunderstorms in this area here. Below AirMets and SIGMETs is another, this is the best thing I've seen, is temporary flight restrictions. It always it always shows you if the temporary flight restriction is active, it'll be colored red. This is one of those permanent temporary flight restrictions, TFRs, that's out there by Grand Forks Air Force Base. This is where they teach all the people to fly drones all over the world. This is where they teach them how to fly the drones. In Minnesota, there's this one that's yellow because it's a TFR, but it only is active when they're blowing up stuff in the open pit mine up here near Hibbing. This is one of the last open pit iron mines in the state of Minnesota. So when this one turns red, that means they're about to blow up another wall inside the open pit mine. And so all those are the TFRs that you can find in the FTC NOTAMs, or if you go to the FAA.gov website and look up TFRs there, these are the TFRs you're going to see. The ones you won't see in any of the FAA publications is this one down here. This one right around that stadium symbol there. This is for the twins. The FAA says, we told you that if a game is going on in a stadium that holds more than 30,000 people, then there will be a TFR there for 3 miles away from the stadium radius and up to 3,000 feet. So you just have to figure out on your own if somebody's playing a game there or not. ForeFlight said, hey, this is going to be easy. We got this big, huge computer here. Let's just take all the sports schedules for all these stadiums that have more than 30,000 seats in them and put them into our computer. And on the day of the day of the game is going to happen, we'll put a yellow ring around the stadium saying that sometime later today there's going to be a TFR around this stadium. And then when the game starts, an hour before the game starts, they'll turn it red because that's when the TFR becomes active. The only problem with this one is if they go into extra innings, or if it's a football stadium and they go into overtime, the TFR may disappear before the game is officially over, because it's supposed to be an hour before the game starts to an hour after the game ends. But this is the only place on ForeFlight, this is as far as I know, maybe one other place online, but this is the only place I know that, or the first place that actually spent the time to display the TFR information for the stadiums around the country. So everything we've just been going through here, the most important stuff is TFRs and traffic right now. The next one that's kind of cool though is this next one down here, which is, they call it flight category. Basically what it is a color depiction of what the weather is like at that airport. What ForeFlight did was take the old area forecast outlook terms for VFR, marginal VFR, IFR, and low IFR, and color coded them. So VFR is really VFR. It's greater than 3,000 foot ceilings and greater than 5 miles visibility. That's the green dot. I move out here, probably down here near Chicago. If it's a blue dot, then it's marginal VFR. The ceilings are 1,000 feet to 3,000 feet, and the visibility is 3 miles, 1 to 3 miles. If it's colored red, it's an IFR airport, and that means the ceilings are 500 to 1,000 foot, and the visibility is from a half mile up to a mile. Let's see if I can find one more. Not today. The last color that they have in the system is for low IFR, which is pink. And that means ceilings below 200 feet, visibility less than a half mile. So if the airport is pink, even if you're a IFR pilot, you're probably not going to that airport. So it's a quick way of if you pull up the flight category on your ForeFlight, it's a quick way of seeing what the weather's like in your area, and with a quick gander of, should I be, before I leave the house, is it even worth going out there to pre-flight the airplane and going flying today? Then there's stuff like surface winds. You move in, well, the problem with this one is if you move in close to the airport, the symbol doesn't get any bigger on the screen. So right over the Minneapolis airport, just like the old winds law forecast charts, the barb is the flagpole is going where the direction of the wind, where the wind is coming from, and the little flags on the flagpole tell you how fast it's going. So if it's a full flag like these two right here, it's probably blowing at 20 knots. If you see a half flag at about half mast, that's 5 knots. So each big flag is 10 knots, each small flag is 5 knots, and if you see a pennant on the pole, then it's 50 knots. You probably won't see 50 knots in these situations here, but that's surface winds. Then there's winds aloft, so the higher you go. There it is, finally came up. So up here, 39,000 feet, the wind's aloft right there at the IMSP. Again, like I said, the symbol doesn't get any bigger the more you expand it out, but there's one where it's going 55 knots, pennant with a small flag. So winds aloft, temperature dew point spread. They color code these so that when it starts going orange and red, it's telling you the dew point spread is getting real close. You're either going to have precipitation or fog. Temperatures in degrees Celsius, you can change that to Fahrenheit if you want. Visibilities with the same color coding as before for the green, blue, red, and pink. Ceilings, where there are ceilings. If it's a beautiful, bright, sunny day like it is here in Minnesota, then you won't see anything. And sky coverage, like the old surface analysis charts. If it's totally open, again, the symbols don't get any bigger. So if it's an open circle, then it's clear. If it's a quarter circle, it's scattered. If it's 3/4, it's broken. If it's fully covered, it's overcast. Areas of lightning down here in Chicago. You can see the, let me make it smaller because it's easier to see. Get rid of the traffic so it's easier to see since there's so much traffic around Chicago. Stop. You can see all the little lightning bolts. So just like your own personal storm scope, you can, now the stuff with all this, the radar information, all the weather information, all this kind of stuff gets put in, taken from the National Weather Service, put into the ForeFlight computer. By the time you're seeing it, it may be as much as 15 to 30 minutes old. So like, so the radar coverage we were looking at before. You may not want to use this as if say, oh, I'm going to fly through this little part of this little green spit in here because that'll be light rain and I don't have to worry about that, the too heavy rain. The information that you're seeing on your scope may be old enough that that thunderstorm, the higher precipitation amount, and obviously with a thunderstorm with all the lightning bolts connected to it, may have moved in the time that for the depiction that you have. So use these information, the lightning and the cloud, the precipitation and all this information with saying, okay, here's where it is. I'm going to avoid this by a very wide margin. I'm not going to try to go through the middle of this. I'm either going to go way south or way north, depending on which way it's going. It does, if when you're on the ground, you do have the capability of hitting the little triangle on the bottom here, and it will skip through all the come on, there it is. It'll skip through all the radar coverage that is memorized and show you the basic direction that this thing is traveling. This works a little bit better on the ground than it does in the air, but you can get a little bit of showing the movement of the storms in the air too. But like I said, some of this information, even though it says it's 4 minutes old or 0 minutes old, that was the time it arrived on your ForeFlight iPad here. The information that you're seeing could be as much as 30 minutes old. So don't use this to navigate it through storms. Use it to avoid storms by a very wide margin. Jiminy Christmas. The obstacles are just that. If you don't have the sectional chart up, then it shows you obstacles. And if you're actually flying, oh, never mind. So if you're actually flying, then these things will become color coded. If you're within 1,000 feet of them, it'll turn yellow. If you're within 500 feet of them, it'll turn red to let you know that you're getting close to this stuff. But if you're on the sectional chart, then all this stuff is appearing on the sectional chart also. You can create waypoints on your own to use in the system. And so then those user waypoints will be displayed when you choose the user waypoint section down here in the bottom. Then you can use those to select if you want to add those to flight plans and such. And because we're all very cost conscious in the aviation world, the very last two things they give you is the price of gas. This one is this one's 100 low lead. The one on the very bottom of that thing is Jet A. I don't know what their price break is between the red and the orange and the green, but the green is the cheapest. But the green also probably means you're going to pump it yourself. So that's everything in the first column there. Now let's move across the top here. We'll talk about the flight plan stuff here in just a little bit. The settings section is just like any settings. It's just basically stuff that you can do to the ForeFlight to make it the way you like it. The very top thing is a slider. You just tap the dot and move it around to adjust the brightness. So if you're flying in the dark, you can make the screen less bright. You can also invert the colors of the charts that you're looking at. So that is, like for the IFR low chart, instead of being a bright white chart, you're looking at a black chart with where all the black stuff's turned white. So it's a little bit easier on your eyes when you're flying around the dark. That's what the invert the colors means. You can change the map themes and all that kind of stuff. The other part is, depending on how you like your maps to go, do you want north up all the time, or do you want track up so that the direction you're going is at the top of the screen? Now I'm not moving right now, so switching between those three choices is not going to do anything. But for me, sometimes when I'm going cross country, I like to fly track up, because then when I'm looking at the chart and the lake's on the left side, then I look outside, the lake will really be on the left side. But I found when I'm doing like that depiction I had earlier, the flight that I did with my student this morning, you're out there doing eights on pylons and turns around a point and chandelles and lazy eights and that type of thing, and the whole screen in your lap is spinning around. Sometimes that gets to be a little much. So for normal flight instruction, I just leave it on north up. And then you want route labels, extended center lines for the airports. That's an excellent one to have. If the airport is in your if the airport is in your flight plan, then it will show you all the extended center lines of all the runways. And it's set up so that if you want to land on the 28 right side on this chart here, that means you got to go to the right side of the chart to be able to line up for runway 28. It was, I have a friend who this is an absolute godsend for, because she always, and I did it for many years too, would always get it backwards, because you're looking at your compass and where the number is up on the compass, or the DG is opposite of where the runway actually is for where you want to land on it. So it always would get very confusing. So this is a way of removing that confusion. If you want to land on runway 18, you got to line yourself up on the north side of the runway, north side of the airport, and fly south to get on runway 18. It makes it a whole lot easier to set things up that way. So that's the extended center line choice here in settings. Distance rings. If you're flying, the distance rings will be around your airplane and tell you how far things are away. Let me see if I can go to where I'm at here. There it is. You can change the distances that these rings are, and they actually follow you along as you're moving along the map. Back to settings. Glide advisor. If you've put the glide information in when we get to the part about the airplane, we'll talk about how to set up if you set up the glide ratio for your airplane as you're flying along, based on the altitude of the ground underneath you, the altitude that you're flying at, and the ground speed that you're flying right at that point. It tells you how far you're going to glide in any particular direction. Track vector is a line out the nose of the airplane when you're moving, to be able to show you where you're going to be in about a minute. Breadcrumbs we talked about. The map legend, if you don't want that stuff, the color coding on the information about the various types of radars, the radar and the icing and all that kind of stuff, if that takes up too much space on your chart, then tap the map legend thing and that stuff will go away. So that's settings. The next one over is the synthetic vision. This is basically if you're set up on if you have something in your airplane that can send attitude information and GPS information to your ForeFlight, like a Stratus system or a Garmin, Garmin system, one of the very advanced Garmin systems, then you'll be able to use this to, as like I said, a poor man's PFD, pilot flight display. The speed you're getting is your ground speed in knots. The altitude you're flying is your GPS altitude, with a climb rate next to that. The DG in the bottom is giving you your ground track. And if you have a flight plan in the system, then the arrows will appear in the middle of that circle, telling you how close you are to your course and that type of thing. But it takes a little while to make, or you have to think about this before you use it, because you got to get it set up. ForeFlight says all over the place in the manual, this is not to be used for flying the airplane for real. It's just nice to know information. But I suppose if everything else went away and this was all you had, it's at least worth giving it a try. So that's the synthetic vision. So then it also color codes. The lower you get, the ground changes from the normal ground colors of looking at lakes and roads and stuff like that, to yellow if you're getting too close, and red if you're really, really close. Same thing with the obstacles off in the distance there. The one with the circle is the information across the bottom here. There's lots of different information that you can put in those spots for, there's all the way from ground speed through flight time, or just leave it blank. So if you multiply all this stuff together, there's like, 5,000 different combinations of the stuff that you can put down here on the bottom of the screen. And if you like to fly with, instead of in the landscape mode, you like to fly in portrait or the other way around, I can never remember which one's like a piece of paper, then the number of spaces that you get across the bottom is reduced and you may not be able to pull as much information. But what I use, as you can see, is ET or ETE, estimated time en route to your destination. The next one is the actual time you're going to get there. Since my destination is usually is my home airport and I need to get the airplane back for the next person's flight, I take a close look at that to make sure that it's when it's time to turn around and head back home. Distance to destination, the track of my ground track right at this moment, the bearing to the next station, bearing to the next point along my flight plan, ET to the next point in the flight plan, distance to the next point, and ground speed. Those are the ones that I use. Like I said, there's all sorts of other stuff you can do. GPS altitude, height AGL based on that GPS altitude, your cabin pressure, how accurate the system is, what your rate of turn is, cross-track error, how far off course you are, where's the nearest airport, nearest nav aid. Those are always nice, sometimes very nice to know. Current coordinates, Zulu time, all sorts of stuff. Lots of different things that you can put in there in this information at the bottom of the screen. The next thing over is if you have a flight plan that you use very often and you like to and you fly that route a lot, you can create it as a favorite. You'll know it's a favorite because when you look at it, in the flight plan world, when you look at it, the little star across the bottom of that flight plan section is turned gold next to that little red circle. That means you've created this thing and it is created as you tap that star, you create it as a favorite, then it shows up in this list. Then you can pull it back up anytime you want. Most of these are, before I got the capability of putting the charts on the map itself, these are lots of the approaches that I would fly. But you can save all sorts of cool things in here. It's not every flight you've ever done. It's only the ones that you've chosen, even including a flight around the world that I planned once. So that's the favorite section. Like I said, over at the very over on the right side here at the top, that last thing, you tap that and it takes you right back to your present location. So quick across the bottom, airport information. This is all the airport facilities chart supplement stuff. Plus all the weather. You got the weather for the airport, the nearest terminal airdrome forecast, the MOS, which stands for, stand by, I always gotta look this up. Model output statistics. It's basically a grid forecast. So if the place that you're flying into is far away from a regular terminal airdrome forecast, sometimes ForeFlight will add this information to it so that you can get some sort of forecast information for the airport. Something they've just added in the last couple of months is a daily forecast, which works out really nice because it gives you information about for another week and a half out. So then when you select that day, and it gives you the same color coding as before, whether there's going to be VFR or not, but the temperatures, the winds, the visibility, the chance of precipitation, it's all there. And then the day you're on turns black. And the winds aloft. Now, this is not exactly like the winds aloft you get in the other thing. This one, ForeFlight takes all the information from the winds aloft, temperatures aloft forecast, puts it into a big computer, and comes up with an estimation of what the winds aloft are going to be at the airport that you're looking at. But just like winds aloft, as you look at the little gray line move by there, it does do a forecast. It gives you information about the winds into the future. But like most winds aloft, it only does it for about the next 24 hours. A little bit longer than that, isn't that nice? You can get information about the airport itself, information about the runways. If it's picking up the weather, then it'll look at the winds and tell you what's the best runway to use based on the winds that are flying, and it'll give you a piece of information about the crosswinds and the headwinds on that particular runway. Procedures for both the airport diagram, any departure procedures for that airport. If there's no departure procedures, there'll always be takeoff minimums. Any arrivals to that airport. Which is so if there's any arrivals to the airport or alternate minimums, the triangle A for the pages, and any approaches to that airport. And any NOTAMs. The information is sort of repeated at the top there, but it also has interesting things. If you've spent the $300 version, you can get a 3D view of the airport. So then you can spin this thing around and say, okay, I'm going to be coming from, the little arrow on the bottom here tells you which way you're looking. So which way you're coming from and what altitude you're at. The more you move the thing down, the higher you are. The altitude MSL is up there in the left-hand corner. So if you're going to fly into this place at 3,000 feet, that's what it's going to look like. This is one of those, is it worth $300? I don't know. It's kind of a nice to have kind of thing if you've never flown to an airport before, to get a general idea of what it's going to look like in the summertime anyway, when you're flying into the airport. Well, that's a 3D view, but everybody will get the FBOs for the airports that you're going to. Taxiways, basically the airport diagram. If there's not an airport diagram in the FAA publications, ForeFlight's been nice enough to create their own. And any comments or remarks, some of this stuff is the stuff right out of the airport facilities directory. If you go to comments, that's usually stuff that people have sent in. ForeFlight does take a look at this before they put it into the system to make sure that it's actually saying something that's worthwhile. Maps we talked about. Plates is a place where you can go into to save place if you want to do. But like we just saw in the airport section, it's much quicker to just be able to pull up the plate by going to the airport itself, going to the procedures tab, tapping on approaches, looking at the approach you want, tap on that, and the approach plate appears right on your screen. That's the quickest way to do that, because if you put them on that, if you put it in the plate section, it's just like back in the days when you had the approach plates in that book. You got to look through the whole page here to find the plate you're looking for. So sometimes it's just easier to go through the airport to find it. Now, some of you will notice that right next to my approach plates in the airport section here, it says map. That's because if you're at least a $200 level, you tap that, it puts the approach plate on the map exactly where it is in the real world, so that you would notice that if you fly this RNAV to runway 31 into Glencoe, that's where you're flying. And what I usually do is if I'm flying with a student, I put the sectional underneath to make sure I'm not flying in any airspace that I'm not supposed to be in. Down here, so then when you tap on the screen, you get what you can either change, you can change the thing, change the chart that's on the screen, hide the screen, go back to the full screen version, which is back to the plate section. But down here in the bottom, it says it says the little dot with the slider on it is opacity. If you slide it all the way to the right, you can't see anything underneath the chart. So then you have to slide the thing to the left, and it kind of dims the chart so you can see the stuff underneath. So if you're flying it yourself, you might want to have it in the mid-range so it's a little bit easier to see. But whatever chart you have underneath here, this thing will be placed right on top of it. Again, that's the $200 level for that. Documents is what we talked about before. Any documents that you have in the air that you have saved from the drives down here will be put in whatever order you want to put them in. They start out alphabetical, but then you can go in there and arrange them if you want. I have outside documents. This is stuff that I've downloaded from the internet and put into a drop. And if you have Dropbox on your computer, there's a ForeFlight app on Dropbox. You can put these documents that you're downloading off the internet into the ForeFlight app in Dropbox. The next time you turn ForeFlight on, the documents appear on your screen. I found that when I'm one of the early adapters of ForeFlight. I've been doing this ever since they almost invented the thing. And so I was putting all sorts of neat documents in here about, POHs for all the airplanes I've flown or are going to fly, information manuals for all the different types of electronics I had on board the airplane, and all sorts of other interesting things. And then I got out of the car one day and I dropped my iPad and the thing broke into a million pieces. So then when I got a new one, all these documents are gone because I just downloaded them from the internet right straight to the iPad. And so that's why I found going to found Dropbox, added that to my computer at home, then because there's a ForeFlight app that you can add to that Dropbox, and then you put all these documents in there. So then if you drop your iPad and you buy a new one, when you open up ForeFlight and sign in with your name, sign into ForeFlight again, it automatically looks and says, oh, look at all these documents in the ForeFlight app in Dropbox, and automatically throws them back into your outside documents folder. Imagery is exactly that, all the different kinds of charts that you can get from the National Weather Service. Flights we'll talk about here in a second. Scratch pads, you can draw on the ForeFlight itself. You can get a blank one where you can just draw on it. There's also ones where it's the CRAFT for IFR, information to put down for ATIS, all sorts of neat things. Checklist we'll talk about in a bit. So before we move on to the part about putting airplanes in, we'll take a little bit of a break here, and then we'll come right back and start talking about adding airplanes and doing flight planning. Okay, so the section I'm in now, to get this white stripe across the right side of the screen, I tap the More tab at the bottom of the screen there. And this is all the stuff that exists in the More tab. At the top, it's Downloads. And when the new sectional charts, the new en route charts, the new low en route, high route, and approach plates come out, then a number will appear down here at the More thing, and you can then, all the things that you've chosen to download will, you can either set it up so that it automatically happens. If you're close to a Wi-Fi signal that's strong enough, it'll automatically download for you, or it'll just, if you don't do that, the number will appear there, and when you get next to Wi-Fi, you can just start it yourself. You don't, it doesn't, if you're in Wi-Fi, it'll show you the whole country, the whole world, just like I showed you earlier. But if while you're flying, if there's specific places you want to look at all the time while you're in the air, then you have to choose what you're looking for. So in the United States, I've chosen not every state, just the stuff that's basically around here, and maybe a little bit extended. I got Ohio and Indiana and that type of thing, because I think I was flying out that direction at one time. So you don't have to select all the states if you don't want. You can only select the areas that you want. But when you select a state like that, and then you click download, it'll give you the airport nav database, and all this stuff is just interesting information to know, but it will download all the taxi diagrams, all the en route charts, all the approach plates, all the information from the chart supplement book. All that information will be downloaded for each state that you have selected. And so then when all that stuff changes or a new update is available, then that information will automatically, either if you have automatic set, it'll pull it down automatically, or it'll download when you do it. It depends on how much memory you got. I think in my iPad, I have the 128 gigabytes of memory, or whatever the heck that number is. I can never remember what it means. And so, but if you want to do the whole United States, you're probably going to have to have a fairly robust iPad. So that's the download stuff. Setting is just being able to set up the ForeFlight the way you like it. We don't need to go through this stuff now. It's just something you need to do on your own. But in here is, how you want the radar to appear, what you want the track vector length to be, how far you want the distance rings to go. And somewhere in here is a place where you can choose what airplane you want to appear on the screen when you go flying around. Unfortunately, there's no F4 in here, so I just had to select a 172. But they got an F-16, an F-15, an F-35. They got all sorts of, C-130s. They got all sorts of airplanes in there to choose whatever you want. But that's in the settings here. The rest of the stuff here is, the very bottom here is if you have passengers on board that have their own iPads, if you select passenger, it will send information out of your iPad that they can pick up in their iPad and follow along with what you're doing. Account information is exactly that. Your name, address, phone number, and all the stuff that you had to give to ForeFlight in order to be able to set this thing up in the first place, including what level of ForeFlight you're paying for at this moment. If you're a Jeppesen subscriber, then you can put in the Jeppesen information from your subscription, and the Jeppesen charts will appear in your ForeFlight also. Support and about information. At the very, very bottom is a clock. You can either have it as a countdown timer or a count up timer. If it's a count up timer, all you do is tap it and it starts counting. The only problem with this one is if you're using this to fly cross country, it doesn't lap. So to figure out what the leg was, you got to look down there, read the time, stop it to read the time, and then hit it again to get it to start for the next leg. But it won't give you total time unless you just let it keep running. So there are other things like my Apple Watch or the stopwatch on my phone that are a whole lot better to use for timing the legs and stuff like that. The main thing we want to do here is other interesting things, fun stuff we're not going to talk about today. You can set this thing up and have it track your logbook, either from the times that ForeFlight senses itself. I think it starts clocking when you go about 15 knots, or you can go in there and adjust it to do for like Hobbs time, just like everybody else does in the world. We'll talk about the weight and balance in the aircraft. Custom content is just stuff that you specifically want for you. Track logs, every time you go flying, if you have the recording button set, it will track exactly where you fly. So now that, so if the breadcrumbs have disappeared and you recorded the flight, you can set it up so the recording happens automatically. Then you can go in here and basically see the same thing. You can't transfer this back to the chart though, so you're basically stuck with looking at it in the aeronautical view of the picture here, but you could, if you wanted to, download the information here to Google Maps and then look at it from above and below and from the side and from the north and from the south and all over the place and add it to Google Maps. But the top part is the route that you flew. The thing, information around the bottom is the blue stuff is the altitude that you were flying, and the green thing is the speed that you were going. So you can always tell when you landed because the speed goes way down, so does the altitude. You can also get pitch information and bank information. There's where the big up and down there was when we were doing steep turns. So that's the track log section there. Back to more. And if you see down here in the bottom row here, the last more thing you looked at shows up right next to the more thing. So if you want to look at it again, just tap and it goes right back to it. So aircraft. You can set this thing up so that the if you're in the $99 level, the $100 level, you're probably going to have to get your POH out to do this because there's going to be a lot of information that you're just going to have to put in on your own. If you're at the $200 level or above, some of this stuff will be automatic. If you can save the aircraft, you notice over here on the left side, all the aircraft that I've already saved. Some of them have little triangles next to them, meaning I haven't finished putting in all the information yet. To start out with a brand new aircraft, if you've never put an airplane in here before, up on the upper left-hand corner there's a big plus. You tap the plus and the information that is required to put in for your airplane appears on the screen. The first thing is the tail number, and then the keyboard shows up when you tap the tail number section there. Always, always, always start with the first number or first letter or set of letters if you're watching this from Canada, of the tail number of the airplane. If you're in the United States, you got to start it with the letter N, because if you have the upper levels, it'll look into the database and actually find the information about, for both the airplane flight planning stuff and the weight and balance stuff, to be able to use this, to be able to look into the ForeFlight system and pull information out about it. So start with the letter N, then switch it over to numbers, 8068, like the letters. Charlie, type in the whole tail number. Then, I'm sorry, let me back up a second. So then down here in aircraft type, you tap the arrow for that, and it comes up with all the different aircraft types of anything, any kind of airplane that they can ever think of in the whole world. So now just start at the top here. PA-28-161, because, and like I said, if you're on the $100 level, you might not get this. But now you can go here and say, okay, I have a Warrior 2 with an 0320 engine in it, and ForeFlight has already put in some performance profiles and set up the takeoff and landing performance data. Again, at the $99 level, you might not see this, but you select that airplane, and that automatically appears under aircraft type, and down here under performance profiles, in the performance section, it already has runway profile information and 3 performance profiles, so you can choose which one that you normally fly with. And if you can, and so when you tap on that performance profile, if you do something slightly different than what it says here, then you can adjust it as necessary to make it exactly the way you fly it. If not, then down in the performance profiles, you'd set up a new performance profile, name it whatever you want, go to your POH, type in all the information that it's looking for. What are you gonna, how do you climb this thing? What's the percent power that you're gonna fly at? What is the RPMs and stuff that you're gonna set, and the and specific models adjustments for your particular airplane, just in case if it's not flying exactly the way the book says anymore. You can put all that stuff, information in there from your POH. Obviously, though, since the November 8068 Charlie's EPA 20-161, it automatically says, obviously, that must be an airplane. If not, you choose airplane. The color you want to put in there, because this is also something you're going to use as the start of the flight plan information, and to be able to file flight plan later. Home airport, where you're most likely always going to fly from. Come on, I heard the click. There it is. The airport you're flying from. The airspeed unit that you're going to use for your flight planning. Again, if you don't have the upper levels, then down here for best glide speed, go to your POH. Figure out what the best glide speed is. Then the best glide ratio. That one's going to be kind of tricky. What you have to do, if you don't have my system here, go in and find the section in the part in section 5 which talks about the gliding distance of your airplane. And then to figure out what the ratio is, you have to, usually the altitude is in feet and the distance you're going to glide is in miles. So now you have to change it to so you have feet and feet or miles and miles. Just have to do some mathematics there. So it's usually easier to do the change the miles to feet, and then take the feet of altitude over the feet that the airplane is going to glide. You divide those two, and whatever number you get, that's your glide ratio. This is the number you want to put in there if you want to use the glide distance data information when you're flying, the little squiggly line that appears around your airplane to show you which direction to be the best, you get the best distance for gliding when you're flying. The default cruise altitude, you put that in yourself, whichever altitude you decide you're always going to fly at. Since this airplane is going to fly VFR, let's put in 4,500 feet. Maximum ceiling, whatever your book says. Like I said, this one's already got that figured out. Information for the weight and balance section. If this has already done it, put the information in there because it knows that because I put the PA28 information at the top. If not, again, go to your POH and put in all this information. Fuel type, how much fuel it uses for start, taxi, and takeoff. How much total usable fuel there is in the airplane, and how much you want to use as a standard reserve fuel. You can adjust that number to whatever you want. The next section is filing information. The FAA equipment is something we don't have to worry about anymore because all flight plans, VFR and IFR that are filed in the United States anymore are now Icao. So we need to figure out what are the codes for Icao equipment, Icao surveillance information, the weight category of the airplane, and the performance-based navigation if you have any of those systems in your airplane. So let me move out of this one here, and gotta go back to here, back to there, stop the share, go to this screen and share the screen, and go to this one and share that. So you can go to FAA.gov and type in any of your search engines and type in Icao flight plan. If you find the one that says Icao PDF and click on it, it's the FAA site with the PDF of the form at the top and about 15 pages of explanation of all what the different codes and things of what you have to put into the flight plan itself. I've broken it down to the ones that are most likely being used by us. So at the very top, the Icao equipment. If you have a radio in your airplane, then you're going to put an S. The S means you have standard radio equipment, including a VOR and an ILS. That's assumed. If you don't have a radio and you still want to file VFR, then there's the, then it's, I can't remember what the other letter is, sorry, but it'd be there saying you don't have radios on board your airplane. The other equipment then you want to put is any extra stuff that you may have on board your airplane. If the airplane is, you can fly LPV approaches with the airplane, then you select the letter B for LPV approaches. If you have DME in your airplane, you select the letter D. You don't have to put that in there if you have the GPS or the GNSS, the letter G next to it, because it assumes that you're going to get your DME from the GPS system then. GNSS is Global Navigation Surveillance System. That's the generic term for GPS. SBAS up there is Space-Based Augmentation System. That's the generic term for WAAS, Wide Area Augmentation System. So those are the standard ones that we have in our airplanes. The surveillance stuff then, if you're flying out of the Twin City area, you're most likely going to have the letter C, because you have to have a transponder with Mode A and Mode C available to be able to fly in and out of the Mode C Vale here in 30 nautical miles around the Minneapolis airport. Now that ADS-B has been required, ADS-B out has been required since January 1st, 2020, then you also have to tell it which ADS-B system you have. If you have the 1090 megahertz system and it's out only, then it's B1. If it's out and in, then it's B2. If your ADS-B system transmits on the UAT frequency band, then it's U1 for out only, U2 for out and in. Weight category is, are you light, medium, or heavy? So most of the people that I know flying a small general aviation airplanes, it's going to be L for light. Then the next one down is for stuff that you have that is over and above normal navigation equipment. Like, you know, you have a WAAS receiver or an RNAV2 GPS system on board. Those are just some examples of stuff in there for the PBN stuff. So back to the other one. So the Icao equipment on board of 8068 Charlie, we have an S. Because we have the standard information there. We also have, and that's it. That's all we got. 8068 Charlie is a fairly generic, easy airplane. So that's the equipment. Surveillance equipment, we have a B2, which is out and in, and a Mode C transponder. The reason you put this in there is because then when you file, all this information is automatically put in the right spot. It knows, because I typed it in, what kind of weight disturbance category is. If you're doing this on your own because you've got the lower level version, just type the letter L in there, and this one doesn't have any fancy performance-based navigation count in it. If for some reason you're carrying life rafts in your airplane, or you got emergency information in there, or you're carrying emergency radios, then this would be information that you put down at the bottom here. All this extra stuff is information that is now required, if you have it on board, required by the Icao flight plan. So that's the airplane part. Next is the weight and balance part. So wait a minute. So we just did 50608. Oh, so since I just brand new put in 8068 Charlie, I have to add a new profile. Tail number, November 8068 Charlie. Whoops. And tap next at the top of the thing there. We want to fly using the normal category airport envelope. So now you would go in and say, okay, now you have to go into your weight and balance document and figure out, okay, how much does the airplane weigh empty? I can't remember exactly what it is. I'll just put 1458.9. The center of gravity at that is 84, and it automatically does the math for you and puts the moment in the bottom. So even though you're on the upper levels of ForeFlight and all that information is automatically put in there, no matter what, you still have to put this information in there because it's the basic information about the airplane itself. Then you tap the next button. So this is just the lawyer stuff telling you some of this stuff may not, depending on what kind of airplane you have, the screen that you're about to see may not have all the information that is exactly for your airplane. But the nice thing about it is, here's the 8068 Charlie, because I'm on the upper levels, it automatically gives me the weight and balance envelope. If you don't have the upper levels, you can go to setup and set up all this stuff in the, where are the front seats, where are the fuel tanks, where is the, what are the minimums, the weights for the airplane, and down here with the forward CG limits and the SCG limits, figure out where all these corners are, type in what the weight is and what the arm is for each of those corners, and then it'll draw the weight and balance system for you. So that's the setup. Then you can load the airplane. You can even, you can even put names of the people in there. Whoops, that again. So the little green square is moved. Every time you add, it automatically does the calculation. And now, if you put a load of baggage in the back, everything turns red saying you're now outside the envelope. So the cool thing about this weight and balance system, once you've got it all set up, it does, now you can start playing with it. Say, okay, maybe I don't need all this baggage. Maybe I'll send some of it FedEx, or maybe I'll leave the two people home and just fly with the people in the front seat and have them drive a car, But the nice thing about this is that it automatically does the calculation as you're adding the information to the load section here in the weight and balance, in order to be able to figure out if you're within limits. The square is where you're at. If you tell it in the hang on a second. Trying to remember where it was that you can figure out, tell it how long you're going to be flying somewhere in the system. I'm sorry, I lost it right now. It'll tell you how long you're flying. And so the square, the circles were weight and balance for takeoff, the squares for landing, but in any case, it gives you the zero fuel. So as you fly, you're going to be somewhere along that line between the square and the diamond. So that's the weight and balance section of the more section. So now back to flight plan. So back to the map section. That maps on the bottom, flight plan at the top. If you're a VFR person, just type in where you're coming from, type in where you're going to, and it draws the line straight between the two places. Just like you did back in private pilot days when you were doing this doing this with a pencil and a plotter on a chart somewhere. But you want to do stuff like you used to, and actually look for checkpoints and make sure you're still on course and things like that. So you decide you're going to take off from Flying Cloud, and your first checkpoint is going to be out here where that little bridge is that goes between the two big chunks of Lake Minnetonka there. So if you put your finger on there and that the little circle up here on the screen underneath your finger, then let go, the information will appear on the side here. It will look for the closest airports if that's what you're trying to do, or the nearest nav aids, or the nearest waypoints. But if you want to use that particular spot, then it gives you the latitude and longitude up at the top there, and you can tap that and it automatically put that as part of your flight plan. But if you're going to use this forever and ever, you tap more and tap save, and you actually type in the name of this spot, and then it becomes one of your user waypoints. That's where those user waypoints come from. Let's go back again, tap, put the circle, and if you just want to use it for one time only, just tap on the latitude and longitude, and the little diamond appears, says there's your first checkpoint. So then you're going to fly along a little bit farther. You're going to use the town of Delano for your next checkpoint. So you tap, get the circle, make sure it's right exactly where you want it to be, then tap the latitude and longitude, and you can do that all the way along. Now, if you get out here and you go, gee, what are all those lakes really going to look like when I'm flying? And get rid of the VFR sectional and go back to the aerial. Again, when you're in a YFI situation, you won't be able to see this in the air, but you can say, okay, that lake that I'm flying next to on the chart really looks like this, because sometimes the sectional information about the landmarks and everything like that may be 5 to 10 years old. It really is out of date. So this is a little bit more up to date, so you can be able to see exactly what you're looking at and do that to figure it out ways. But you can also do this and get in real close and see what the roads are and everything. So again, it says just past the industrial area here, just before I get to the lake, that's going to be the point that I want to use, and then tap and it gets on your flight plan. All this information then appears in the flight plan itself as you're going through there, and when you get to Fargo and you want to come back and fly the exact same points and do everything backwards, the little double arrow down there in the bottom next to the word clear, you tap that and it reverses the course. If you're all done with this and you want to clear the whole thing, you tap clear and then clear all again, and everything disappears. If you're going, wait a minute, and I did that anyway. You can clear individual pieces by just tapping on the point in the flight plan form itself, and then when it turns into a ghost, just move it off the screen and it disappears. So you can do it one thing at a time or doing everything all at once. For you IFR guys, start out the same way. Come on. Start out with, it'll just draw the line, just like it did on the for the direct, so just two places, it just draws a line directly between the two airports. Then if you want to do it old school, you can look at it real close here and say, okay, I want to take off and fly up there using Victor Airways. So, well, let's see, first I want to go to Jonah intersection and intercept Victor 171. So now you tap and get the little circle on the thing, and now it turns into a rubber band. You can move this thing anywhere you want. So now you bring it down here close to Jonah intersection and pick waypoints, and then choose Jonah intersection, and it puts Jonah intersection on there on your flight plan. And then from Jonah, if you want to do Victor 171, the nice thing about that is if you tap Jonah and do insert after Jonah and type in V, go to numbers, 171, insert. It draws 171 all the way till the end of the route. So 171 until it gets close to where you're going, and then it says, well, that's close enough. Then we're going to go into Fargo from roll log. But if you want to do 171 to Alexandria, get off on Alexandria and go to a different spot, just tap the 171, insert after 171, type in AXN, insert, then tap AXN, insert after that, and type in Victor 2, insert that, and now it goes, and now you want to go Victor 2, insert after that, and go to FAR, the VOR, insert that. And so you just like old school, you can just look at the chart and look at the stuff and just type it all in. And then this information is all set up, ready to go. And then when you go to Navlog, all that information is right there, including distances and magnetic courses between the two of them, the distance between the two of them. And when you start flying, the numbers at the end there for how much distance you have remaining and your estimated time of arrival at each one of those points will appear on the in the Navlog section as you're flying along. So that's one way to do it for IFR stuff. The other way is go back to edit and tap the route section. The nice thing about this one is that this route section takes the, for you IFR guys, it takes the information that has been that people have, routes that people have filed and have been authorized by ATC to fly, and I think about the last month. You have to be careful with this because take a close look at the altitudes that they're flying to make sure that this is something that your airplane could do. So we got turboprop jet for the first one, that's at 12,000, another one for 12,000, piston airplane flying from 5,000 to 6,000, but still trying to go to 12,000 feet. So then try to find something that looks close to, there's ours. Jonah, Victor 171, Alexander, Victor 2, Fargo. Or there's a direct route. Somebody actually did get direct to Fargo. If you choose something other, so you don't have to do all the typing in if you don't want. You can just go to this thing and say, oh, there's the one I want. Let me use that one. I don't know why you want to go to Brainerd and then go to Fargo, but then you select the route and it automatically puts it in the flight plan for you. So the route section there is for IFR stuff. The procedure section, just a note above that, is leaving, again, add stuff to your flight plan if you want to do it. If you know that when you take off out of here, they're always going to give you the Cape Brew 1 departure, then select that, and you want the Fargo transition, add it to your route. Because you already went Brainerd the other way, there it is. But so it's obviously not, I was only going to take you to Gopher and then not much farther than that. But you can do that. You can also hit approach into Fargo and do, so if there were arrival routes into Fargo, they'd have an arrival section in there. But now you can also go in and say, okay, the winds today are favoring runway 18. So I'm going to choose the ILS runway 18, it puts the chart on there for you. And I want to start it from Fargo, and you add it to the route, and it'll automatically put it in there. So if you're looking for how long is it really going to take you to fly this thing, you can easily throw in all the points too. Now mine put the approach plate on the chart because I have that version of ForeFlight. But even so, if you didn't, you'd have all the points along there so that you could see where you're flying along the route of the approach, even though you didn't have the approach plate right there on the map with you. So that's another way to do that. if you're a VFR guy, you can even do traffic patterns. It tells you which runway has the best wind, and then you can choose, okay, from where you're going, the best thing is a midfield teardrop, so that you can choose that one, or you can go this one, or the 45 to downwind, or from right traffic, the 45 to downwind, if they'll let you do that, crossfade, meal, tilt. So now you can even put all this information on there and, do, for the VFR guys, figure out exactly which route you're going to fly to be able to get to the runway that you want to land at. But when you're doing the VFR stuff, it actually gives you the information based on what the wind's doing that particular day. Or you could just do it straight in. So that was all under the procedure section. Search and rescue, this is where those grids, there's another place where you can get those grids in there if you're a CAP kind of guy. So once you have all this information in there, and this is exactly what you want to do as far as filing this information, then you can go down to the bottom. Let me stop for a second. So now you see this little suitcase down here with a number 1 next to it. While you're sitting on the ground, hooked up to Wi-Fi, if you don't have anything in your airplane, like ADS-B in, that's going to be able to give you weather information while you're flying, you tap the little suitcase, and it will download all the current weather information for anywhere inside that little gray line that's all the way around your route. It'll pick all the airports, all the forecasts, all the NOTAMs, and all that information, and all the TFRs and airmets and SIGMETs inside, and obviously fuel prices, and for mine, the 3D view aerial imagery. All that information will be available for you, and you can tap the little thing there, and it will, if you tap the word pack, it will download all that information into your ForeFlight, and that information will be available for you to use even while you're flying. Now again, you have to use the weather information with a grain of salt, because it will be, if it takes you 2 hours to get to Fargo, and it took you 30 minutes to get your airplane ready, it's going to be 2.5 hours old by the time you get to Fargo. But at least it's something. If you don't have weather information available to you in the airplane, you can be able to at least get something, some information available to you, downloaded to your ForeFlight while you're connected to Wi-Fi, so that you can use that in the air if you don't have access to an ADS-B in system in your airplane. So that was the little suitcase. If you're going to fly this route forever, you can tap the little star, put a name on it, and make it a favorite route that will always appear in the favorite section of the star thing at the top of the page there. The next thing is all sorts of stuff that you can do with this flight plan once it's, anytime you put it in here. You can email it to somebody. You can look at the place that's available for it. You can add the information to your logbook, send it to a clipboard, share the FPL file. That's the thing that gives you the after you've flown it, sharing the FPL file sends the stuff to Google Maps. You can print it out. You can send it to a passenger inside the airplane with you, or up in the middle here, tap flights. And this is the very beginning of filing the information for your, to get this filed for, to go to be, to be filed with 1-800 Weather Brief, which is exactly the system that ForeFlight uses. So we got one error: max fuel used exceeded by 8 gallons. So we can't go all the way there in 2240 Golf. So we'll have to ignore that for just a second. Performance calculations based on 12,000 feet. Well, maybe that's my problem. Maybe if I come down a little bit in altitude. So anytime you pull up the altitude, if you're connected to Wi-Fi, it'll give you generic information, not each individual leg, but overall the entire flight, what altitudes, where is what the winds are at all those altitudes. So then you can pick something like, well, let's go at 3,500 feet instead. It's still got too much, still using too much gas, but that makes it a little bit more realistic. But then you can change in how many people you got on board and how much, this is more for the charter folks feeling all this information, but most of this stuff came right from the aircraft itself, the information from the aircraft, what Icao information that you had in for that one, all that stuff's already in there. You can look at the nav log for the route that you've just put on it and print this thing out so that you can have it with you while you're flying. The most important part, though, is this briefing thing. If you tap briefing, what it's doing right now is connecting to 1-800-WEATHER BRIEF and getting an official weather briefing from 1-800-WEATHER BRIEF. So just like calling the flight service station on the phone, this does all that for you. Now you're going to have to read it yourself instead of having somebody read it to you, but now it has all the information that you would get from a standard weather briefing. So the first thing is any temporary flight restrictions along your route of flight. So it's talking about the Twins game at the target field. Then you move on to the next thing. It gives you the synopsis, the surface analysis chart. Again, I love this part of the weather briefing. You're going, I'm flying from Minneapolis to Fargo, and it gives me the whole United States, but that's just the way it does. But then anywhere along your route of flight, it gives you all the METARs. Now you can look into each one and look at all the information. It tells exactly with it. But if you're just trying to figure out if I'm going to be able to stay VFR the whole flight, just look down the side here at the green dots. And if they turn red or turn blue or red, then you may think about maybe either changing a route or even not going that day. But if you're worried about winds, then you can look at each individual one and say, okay, looks like it's a gusty day today, very close by here. Everything it knows close by is gusting to 19, 21, 17 knots. But it gives you all the airports inside that ring that we were looking at earlier. Then it does pi reps if there are any along your route of flight. So we have something at 1918 Zulu at 3,500 feet and a PA-28, turbulence was light to moderate. Ooh, that sounds cool. Cloud coverage. But this one gives a forecast. So now you can see how the clouds are going to change by tapping each one of these things. It changes the location and time for each individual situation. Back to now we have winds. So again, with the and we go north central to get it better for the flight that we're going. So just tap on the thing to get the full thing. Oh, look, we got thunderstorms over in Chicago. The winds, I think, are for the route that you're flying. Although this might be airports because it also has gusting. Anything with the little red flag on it tells you what the gust speed is doing. Terminal aerodrome forecast, just reading it, but you can read through it to look specifically for the information. For if you're an IFR guy looking for what alternate you might want to use. But again, color coded, so you quick glance through it. Winds and temperatures aloft chart for the altitude you're probably flying at. This is 3,500 feet, so it does an interpolation for you. Now you can look at it from the side based on the altitude you've chosen and the flight path you're flying. And the winds as you go up and down, so you can choose if you figure out if it'd be better at a higher altitude. Here's the official, so using the ForeFlight system, the winds and temperatures aloft ForeFlight for all the areas, intersections and airports along your route of flight. Departure NOTAMs, destination NOTAMs, en route NOTAMs, service NOTAMs, airspace NOTAMs, runway taxiway NOTAMs, every other kind of NOTAM, center NOTAMs, and back to the beginning. So now, even without looking at it, you've got an official weather briefing. If, like everybody reads an accident happens and you're reading the report and it says the reason they crashed is because they didn't get an official weather briefing. Now you got an official weather briefing. So then when you're done with the briefing part, you tap back here in the upper left-hand corner and all the way down at the bottom. And so you start moving up, make sure you got all the information is correct exactly the way you want it. Then tap in the lower right-hand corner, proceed to file, and it will file this information to 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF. If it's an IFR flight plan and you want to figure out, am I going to get exactly what I filed? The cool thing about ForeFlight is one of the things you're going to put in the account information is your cell phone number and your email address, and it's going to send you a text message and an email or an email if you don't have a text on your phone. Send you an email that says this is what ATC is going to give you when you call up and ask, when you say I'm ready to pick up my IFR clearance. So you can look at that and see if it's going to be different than what you filed, what you originally wanted. Go back to ForeFlight, put all that information in ForeFlight the way you want it, and then you almost have the CRAFT stuff already filled out, because you know that if it's not what you filed, they're going to give you cleared to Fargo via, and that means you're going to have to write down all this stuff, and so that information will already be in there. You already put it in ForeFlight, then you just repeat it back, and away you go. So the nice thing about ForeFlight is they will let you know, for you IFR guys, what you're going to get, what you're going to be cleared for before you leave the ground. Okay, so like I said, a lot of information, a lot of stuff to go through, even in 2 hours. When I did this at the Great Minnesota Aviation Gathering at Buffalo Airport last month, they gave me 45 minutes, so I had to cut that one way back. So if any of you watching today were at that one, this was the expanded version. But as you can see, there's lots of information available. A lot more information is available on here than I even have time for to talk about, even in a 2-hour period. So, are there any questions? I got everybody muted, but I think it's set up so that you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
When you finish putting all the information in for your flight, would it give you a turbulence map, or are you able to find that through the main page, through the main map page?
Yeah, so now on the map page itself, one of the sections you can choose is turbulence US, and see if at the altitude you're flying, moving the little thing down, if there's any turbulence in your area.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem. Anything else?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, so I see this is being recorded. If I wanted to go over this again later, where are you going to talk about where I can access the recording?
If you go to YouTube and type in Thunderbird Aviation, we've created a Thunderbird Aviation YouTube channel. And all the seminars we've done, both me and Paul Block, our director of maintenance, all those seminars that we've recorded are on there. So this ForeFlight one's been on there a couple times, and there's some other stuff that I've done seminars on about IFR flying and flying IFR if you got communication failure and stuff like that. So all these seminars are on our YouTube channel now. So I think if you just search on YouTube for Thunderbird Aviation, you should be able to find it. If not, just send me an email, because my email address is in the FAA thing that you signed up on. Just send me an email and I'll get with my computer guru and see what the process is for getting to the. This won't be downloaded immediately, but it'll be on there sometime next week.
Thank you.
Anything else? So hang on a second. Let me tap some buttons here. So the next seminar we have coming from Thunderbird Aviation is 2 weeks from today on Saturday. It's only going to be an hour long. It's going to be from 1 to 2 on Saturday with Paul Block, our Director of Maintenance. He's going to talk about time between overhauls for all you people with aging aircraft. And he's also going to talk about hot weather operations. How do you handle your airplane in this heat to make sure that you're not overstressing the airplane itself. My next seminar will be a month from today on July 10th via Zoom. This one will just be an hour long. I'll talk about summer weather hazards. So how do you figure out where what is the hazardous weather that normally happens in the summertime? Thunderstorms, tornadoes, microbursts, that type of thing. How do you figure out where that stuff is happening? I'll be using my ForeFlight and other weather information sources to show you how to find the convective sigmets and all that type of thing. And I'll be talking about that next Saturday. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Thank you very much for coming today. Oh, there's a chat. Hang on. Oh, no, thank you very much. So if you have any questions or comments, just send them to the email address that you in the FAA website that you used to sign this up. My Zoom guru will send me all your emails sometime early next week, and I will go into the FAA safety.gov website system. And for those of you who are looking for credit for this for your wings program, I will put the wings credit in sometime next week. It's the end of the quarter, so I got a lot of stage checks and check rides to do. So I will try to get it done next week, if not the week after at the earliest. I will get the information into the FAA.safety.gov website to make sure you get credit for sitting through this 2-hour seminar today. I appreciate everybody who came in today, and thank you very much for coming.